Good evening, all. Welcome to Liminal Views. Thank you for joining me once again to read Pollyanna. If you'd like to support me and the channel, there is a link to buy me a coffee and check out my handcrafted items for sale or commission. You can also follow me on Blue Sky or join me on Discord. So let's take a moment, first of all, to settle into a place of stories and dreams. Take a breath and ground yourself so that your imagination can soar. Last time, we saw Aunt Polly entirely unprepared for the chaos of a typical 11-year-old girl and utterly bewildered by the irrepressible positivity of her young niece in particular. Pollyanna, meanwhile, is desperately trying to process her overwhelming grief with a determination to find something to be glad about in every difficulty she encounters. This is the glad game, a way of thinking instilled in her by her late father. This game will become increasingly important as the story unfolds. Chapter 8. Pollyanna Pays a Visit. It was not long before life at the Harrington homestead settled into something like order, though not exactly the order that Miss Polly had at first prescribed. Pollyanna sewed, practiced, read aloud, and studied cooking in the kitchen, it is true, but she did not give to any of these things quite so much time as had first been planned. She had more time also to just live, as she had expressed it, for almost all of every afternoon from 2 until 6 o'clock was hers to do with as she liked, provided she did not like to do certain things already prohibited by Aunt Polly. It is a question, perhaps, whether all this leisure time was given to the child as a relief to Pollyanna from work, or as a relief to Aunt Polly from Pollyanna. Certainly, as those first July days passed, Miss Polly found occasion many times to ejaculate, "What an extraordinary child!" And certainly the reading and sewing lessons found her at their conclusion each day somewhat dazed and wholly exhausted. Nancy, in the kitchen, fared better. She was not dazed or exhausted. Wednesdays and Saturdays came to be, indeed, red-letter days to her. There were no children in the immediate neighborhood of the Harrington homestead for Pollyanna to play with. The house itself was on the outskirts of the village, and though there were other houses not far away, they did not chance to contain any boys or girls near Pollyanna's age. This, however, did not seem to disturb Pollyanna in the least. "Oh, no, I don't mind at all," she explained to Nancy. "I'm just happy to walk around and see the streets and houses and watch the people. I just love people. Don't you, Nancy?" "Well, I can't say I do, all of them," retorted Nancy tersely. Almost every pleasant afternoon found Pollyanna begging for an errand to run so that she might be off for a walk in one direction or the other, and it was on these walks that frequently she met the man. To herself, Pollyanna always called him the man, no matter if she met a dozen other men in the same day. The man often wore a long black coat and a high silk hat, two things that the just men never wore. His face was clean-shaven and rather pale, and his hair, showing below his hat, was somewhat gray. He walked erect and rather rapidly, and he was always alone, which made Pollyanna vaguely sorry for him. Perhaps it was because of this that she one day spoke to him. "How do you do, sir? Isn't this a nice day?" she called cheerily as she approached him. The man threw a hurried glance about him, then stopped uncertainly. Did you speak to me?" he said in a sharp voice. "Well, yes, sir," beamed Pollyanna. "I say, it's a nice day, isn't it?" "Eh? Oh, he grunted and strode on again. Pollyanna laughed. He was such a funny man, she thought. The next day she saw him again. "'Tisn't quite so nice as yesterday, but it's pretty nice," she called out cheerfully. "Eh? Oh, grunted the man as before, and once again Pollyanna laughed happily. When for the third time Pollyanna accosted him in much the same manner, the man stopped abruptly. "See here, child. Who are you? And why are you speaking to me every day?" "Well, I'm Pollyanna Whittier, and I thought you looked lonesome. I'm so glad you stopped. Now we're introduced. Only I don't know your name yet." "Well, of all the man did not finish his sentence, but strode on faster than ever. Pollyanna looked after him with a disappointed droop of her usually smiling lips. "Well, maybe he didn't understand. But that was only half an introduction. I don't know his name yet," she murmured and proceeded on her way. Pollyanna was carrying castfoot jelly to Mrs. Snow today. Mrs. Polly Harrington always said something to Mrs. Snow once a week. She said she thought it was her duty, inasmuch as Mrs. Snow was poor, sick, and a member of her church. It was the duty of all church members to look out for her. Of course, Miss Polly did her duty by Mrs. Snow, usually on Thursday afternoons. Not personally, but through Nancy. Today, Pollyanna had begged the privilege, and Nancy had promptly given it to her in accordance with Miss Polly's orders. "And as glad I am to get rid of it," Nancy had declared in private afterwards to Pollyanna. "Though it's a shame to be tucking a job off to you, per lamb, so it is, so it is." "But I'd love to do it, Nancy." "Well, you won't, after you've done it once," predicted Nancy sourly. "Well, why not?" "'Cause nobody does. If folks wasn't sorry for her, there wouldn't a soul go near her from morning till night. She's that cantankerous. All is, I pity her daughter, what has to take care of her." "But why, Nancy?" Nancy shrugged her shoulders. "Well, in plain words, it's just that nothing whatever has happened rotten, Mrs. Snow's eyes. Even the days of the week ain't run to her mind. Well, if it's Monday, she's bound to say she wished 'twas Sunday. And if you take her jelly, you're pretty sure to hear she wanted chicken. But if you did bring the chicken, she'd just be hankering for lamb broth." "Why, what a funny woman," laughed Pollyanna. "I think I should like to go and see her. She might be so surprising and different. Oh, I love different folks." "Well, Miss Snow's different, all right. I hope for the sake of the rest of us," Nancy had finished grimly. Pollyanna was thinking of these remarks today as she turned in at the gate of the shabby little cottage. Her eyes were quite sparkling indeed at the prospect of meeting this different Mrs. Snow. A pale-faced, tired-looking young girl answered her knock at the door. "How do you do?" began Pollyanna politely. "I'm from Miss Polly Harrington, and I'd like to see Mrs. Snow, please." "Well, if you would, you'd be the first one that ever liked to see her," muttered the girl under her breath, but Pollyanna did not hear this. The girl had turned and was leading the way through the hall to a door at the end of it. In the sick room, after the girl had ushered her in and closed the door, Pollyanna blinked a little before she could accustom her eyes to the gloom. Then she saw, dimly outlined, a woman half sitting up in the bed across the room. Pollyanna advanced at once. "How do you do, Mrs. Snow?" Aunt Polly says she hopes you're comfortable today, and she sent you some calf's foot jelly." "Dear me, jelly," muttered a fretful voice. "Of course. I'm very much obliged, but I was hoping 'twould be lamb's broth today." Pollyanna frowned a little. Why, I thought it was chicken you wanted when folks brought you jelly," she said. "What?" The sick woman turned sharply. "Nothing much," apologized Pollyanna hurriedly. "And of course it doesn't really make any difference. It's only Nancy said it was chicken you wanted when we brought jelly, and lamb's broth when we brought chicken. But maybe 'twas the other way, and Nancy forgot." The sick woman pulled herself up until she sat erect in the bed, a most unusual thing for her to do, though Pollyanna did not know this. Well, Miss Impertinence, who are you? She demanded. Pollyanna laughed gleefully. Oh, that's my name, Mrs. Snow. I'm so glad it isn't, too. That'd be worse than Hepzibah, wouldn't it? I'm Pollyanna Whittier, Miss Polly Harrington's niece, and I've come to live with her. Well, that's why I'm here with the jelly this morning. All through the first part of this sentence, the sick woman had sat interestedly erect, but at the reference to the jelly, she fell back on her pillow listlessly. Very well. Thank you. Your aunt is very kind, of course, but my appetite isn't very good this morning, and I was wanting lamb. She stopped suddenly, then went on with an abrupt change of subject. Well, I never slept a wink last night, not a wink. Oh, dear. Well, I wish I hadn't, sighed Pollyanna, placing the jelly in the little stand and seating herself comfortably on the nearest chair. Well, you lose a lot of time just sleeping. Don't you think so? Lose time? Sleeping? Exclaimed the sick woman. Well, yes, when you might be just living, you know. Well, it seems such a pity we can't live nights, too. Once again, the woman pulled herself erect in her bed. Well, if you ain't the amazing young one, she cried. Here, do you go to that window and pull up the curtain? She directed. Well, I should like to know what you look like. Pollyanna rose to her feet, but she laughed a little ruefully. Oh, dear. Well, then you'll see my freckles, won't you? She sighed as she went to the window. And, well, just when I was being so glad it was dark and you couldn't see 'em. There. Now you can... Oh! She broke off excitedly as she turned back to the bed. Well, I'm so glad you wanted to see me, 'cause now I can see you. Well, they didn't tell me you were so pretty. Me? Pretty? Scoffed the woman bitterly. Why, yes. Didn't you know it? Cried Pollyanna. Well, no, I didn't, retorted Mrs. Snow dryly. Mrs. Snow had lived 40 years, and for 15 of those years she had been too busy wishing things were different to find much time to enjoy things as they were. Oh, but your eyes are so big and dark, and your hair's all dark too, and curly, cooed Pollyanna. Well, I love black curls. That's one of the things I'm going to have when I get to heaven. And you've got 2 little red spots in your cheeks. Why, Mrs. Snow, you are pretty. I should think you'd know it when you looked at yourself in the glass. The glass? Snapped the sick woman, falling back on her pillow. Yes, well, I ain't done much pricking before the mirror these days. And you wouldn't, if you was flat in your back as I am. Well, no, of course not, agreed Pollyanna sympathetically. But wait, just let me show you, she exclaimed, skipping over to the bureau and picking up a small hand glass. On the way back to the bed, she stopped, eyeing the sick woman with a critical gaze. Well, I reckon, maybe, if you don't mind. I'd like to fix your hair just a little before I let you see it, she proposed. May I? Fix your hair, please. Well, I suppose so, if you want to, permitted Mrs. Snow grudgingly. But don't stay, you know. Oh, thank you. I love fixing people's hair, exulted Pollyanna, carefully laying down the hand glass and reaching for a comb. Well, I shan't do much today, of course. I am in such a hurry for you to see how pretty you are. But some day I'm going to take it all down and have a perfectly lovely time with it, she cried, touching with soft fingers the waving hair above the sick woman's forehead. For 5 minutes, Pollyanna worked swiftly, deftly, combing a refractory curl into fluffiness, perking up a drooping ruffle at the neck, or shaking a pillow into plumpness so that the head might have a better pose. Meanwhile, the sick woman, frowning prodigiously and openly scoffing at the whole procedure, was, in spite of herself, beginning to tingle with a feeling perilously near to excitement. There! Panted Pollyanna, hastily plucking a pink from a vase nearby and tucking it into the dark hair where it would give the best effect. Now, Now I reckon we're ready to be looked at. And she held out the mirror in triumph. Humph, grunted the sick woman, eyeing her reflection severely. I like red pinks, better'n pink ones. But then it'll fade anyhow before night. So what's the difference? But I should think you'd be glad they did fade, laughed Pollyanna, because then you can have the fun of getting some more. I just love your hair all fluffed out like that, she finished with a satisfied gaze. Don't you? Hmm, maybe. Still, 'twon't last, with me tossing back and forth on the pillow as I do. Well, of course not. And I'm glad too, Polly nodded Pollyanna cheerfully, because then I can fix it again. Anyhow, I should think you'd be glad it's black. Black shows up so much nicer on a pillow than yellow hair like mine does. Maybe, but I never did set much store by black hair. Shows gray too soon, retorted Mrs. Snow. She spoke fretfully, but she still held the mirror before her face. Oh, I love black hair. I should be so glad if only I had it, sighed Pollyanna. Mrs. Snow dropped the mirror and turned irritably. Well, no, you wouldn't. Not if you were me. You wouldn't be glad for black hair nor anything else if you had to lie here all day as I do. Pollyanna bent her brows in a thoughtful frown. Why, 'twould be kind of hard to do it then, wouldn't it? She mused aloud. Do what? Be glad about things. Be glad about things when you're sick in bed all your days? Why, I should say it would, retorted Mrs. Snow. If you don't think so, just tell me something to be glad about, that's all. To Mrs. Snow's unbound amazement, Pollyanna sprang to her feet and clapped her hands. Oh, goody! That'll be a hard one, won't it? I've got to go now, but I'll think and think all the way home, and maybe the next time I come I can tell it to you. Goodbye. I've had a lovely time. Goodbye, she called again as she tripped through the doorway. Well, I never. Now, what does she mean by that? Ejaculated Mrs. Snow, staring up at her visitor. By and by, she turned her head and picked up the mirror, eyeing her reflection critically. That little thing has got a knack with hair, no mistake, she muttered under her breath. I declare, I didn't know it could look so pretty. But then what's the use, she sighed, dropping the little glass into the bedclothes and rolling her head onto the pillow fretfully. A little later, when Milly, Mrs. Snow's daughter, came in, the mirror still lay among the bedclothes, though it had been carefully hidden from sight. Why, Mother, the curtain's up, cried Milly, dividing her amazed stare between the window and the pink in her mother's hair. Well, what if it is? Snapped the sick woman. I didn't stay in the dark all my life. Am I sick, need I? Well, no, of course not, rejoined Milly in hasty conciliation as she reached for the medicine bottle. It's only, well, you know very well. I've tried to get you to have a lighter room for ages, and, well, you wouldn't. There was no reply to this. Mrs. Snow was picking at the lace on the ground. At last she spoke fretfully. I should think somebody might give me a new nightdress instead of lamb's broth for change. What, Mother? No wonder Milly quite gasped aloud with bewilderment. In the drawer behind her at this moment lay 2 new nightdresses that Milly for months had been vainly urging her mother to wear. Chapter 9, which tells of the man. It rained the next time Pollyanna saw the man. She greeted him, however, with a bright smile. It isn't so nice today, is it? She called blithesomely. I'm glad it doesn't rain always, anyhow. The man did not even grunt this time, nor turn his head. Pollyanna decided that, of course, he did not hear her. The next time, therefore, which happened to be the following day, she spoke up louder. She thought it particularly necessary to do this anyway, for the man was striding along, his hands behind his back and his eyes on the ground, which seemed to Pollyanna preposterous in the face of the glorious sunshine and the freshly washed morning air. Pollyanna, as a special treat, was on a morning errand today. How do you do? She chirped. I'm so glad it isn't yesterday, aren't you? The man stopped abruptly. There was an angry scowl on his face. Say here, little girl. We might as well settle this thing right now once and for all, he began testily. I've got something besides the weather to think of. I don't know whether the sun shines or not." Pollyanna beamed joyously. "No, sir. Well, I thought you didn't. Well, that's why I told you." "Yes. Well, what?" He broke off sharply at sudden understanding of her words. "I say, well, that's why I told you. So you would notice it, that the sun shines and all that. I know you'd be glad it did if you only stopped to think of it, and you didn't look a bit as if you were thinking of it." "Well, of all the—" ejaculated the man with an oddly impotent gesture. He started forward again, but after the second step he turned back, still frowning. "Say here, why don't you find someone your own age to talk to?" "Well, I'd like to, sir. But there aren't any round here," Nancy says. "Still, I don't mind so very much. I like old folks just as well, maybe better, sometimes, being used to ladies' aid so." "Humph, ladies' aid, indeed. Is that what you took me for?" The man's lips were threatening to smile, but the scowl above them was still trying to hold them grimly stern. Pollyanna laughed gleefully. "Oh, no, sir. You don't look a mite like a ladies' aider. Not but that you're just as good, of course, maybe better," she added in hurried politeness. "You see, I'm sure you're much nicer than you look." The man made a queer noise in his throat. "Well, of all the—" he ejaculated again, and he turned and strode on as before. The next time Pollyanna met the man, his eyes were gazing straight into hers with a quizzical directness that made his face look really pleasant, Pollyanna thought. "Good afternoon," he greeted her a little stiffly. "Perhaps I'd better say right away that I know the sun is shining today." "Well, you don't have to tell me," nodded Pollyanna brightly. "I knew you knew it just as soon as I saw you." "Oh, you did you?" "Yes, sir. I saw it in your eyes, and in your smile." Grunted the man as he passed on. The man always spoke to Pollyanna after this, and frequently he spoke first, though usually he said little but "good afternoon." Even that, however, was a great surprise to Nancy, who chanced to be with Pollyanna one day when the greeting was given. "Sakes alive, Miss Pollyanna," she gasped. "Did that man speak to you?" "Why, yes, he always does now," smiled Pollyanna. He always does? Goodness. "Do you know who he is?" demanded Nancy. Pollyanna frowned and shook her head. "Well, I reckon he forgot to tell me one day. You see, I did my part of the introducing, but he didn't." Nancy's eyes widened. "But he never speaks to anybody, child. He ain't for years, I guess, except when he just has to for business and all that. Well, he is John Pendleton. He lives all by himself in the big house on Pendleton Hill. He won't even have anyone round to cook for him. Comes down to the hotel for his meals 3 times a day. I know Sally Miner, who waits on him, and she says he hardly opens his head enough to tell her what he wants to eat. She asked her guests more than half the time. Well, it'll be something cheap. She knows that without no telling." Pollyanna nodded sympathetically. "I know. You have to look for cheap things when you're poor. Father and I took meals out a lot. We had beans and fish balls most generally. We used to say how glad we were that we liked the beans. That is, we said especially when we were looking at the roast turkey place, Well, that was 60 cents. Does Mr. Pendleton like beans?" "Like 'em? What if he does or don't?" "Why, Miss Pollyanna, he ain't poor. He's got loads of money, John Pendleton has, from his father. There ain't nobody in town as rich as he is. He could eat dollar bills if he wanted to, and not know it." Pollyanna giggled. "As if anybody could eat dollar bills and not know it, Nancy, when they come and try to chew 'em." "I mean, he's rich enough to do it," shrugged Nancy. "He ain't spending his money, that's all. He's a saving it." "Oh, for the heathen," surmised Pollyanna. "Oh, perfectly splendid. Well, as denying yourself and taking up your cross, I know. Father told me." Nancy's lips parted abruptly, as if there were angry words all ready to come, but her eyes, resting on Pollyanna's jubilantly trustful face, saw something that prevented the words being spoken. She vouchsafed. Then, showing her trust, she went on, "But say, it is queer speaking to you honestly, Miss Pollyanna. He don't speak to no one, and he lives all alone in a great big lovely house all full of just grand things, they say. Some say he's crazy, and some just cross, and some say he's got a skeleton in his closet." "Oh, Nancy!" shuddered Pollyanna. "How can he keep such a dreadful thing? I should think he'd thrown it away." Nancy chuckled. That Pollyanna had taken the skeleton literally instead of figuratively, she knew very well, but perversely she refrained from correcting the mistake. Everybody says he's mysterious, she went on. Some years he just travels, week in and week out, and it's always in heathen countries, Egypt and Asia and the desert of Sahara, you know? Oh, a missionary, nodded Pollyanna. Nancy laughed oddly. Well, I didn't say that, Miss Pollyanna. When he comes back, he writes books. Queer, odd books, I say, about some gimmick he found in the heathen countries. But he don't never seem to want to spend no money here. Leastwise, not for just living. Well, of course not, if he's saving it for the heathen, declared Pollyanna. But he is a funny man, and he's different too, just like Mrs. Snow, only he's a different. Well, I guess he is, rather, chuckled Nancy. I'm gladder than never now, anyhow, that he speaks to me, sighed Pollyanna contentedly. Chapter 10. A Surprise for Mrs. Snow. The next time Pollyanna went to see Mrs. Snow, she found that lady, as at first, in a darkened room. It's a little girl from Miss Polly's mother, announced in a tired manner. Then Pollyanna found herself alone with the invalid. Oh, that's you, is it? Asked a fretful voice from the bed. I remember you. Anybody'd remember you, I guess. If they saw you once. I wish you'd come yesterday. I wanted you yesterday. Did you? Well, I'm glad 'tisn't any farther away from yesterday than today is, then, laughed Pollyanna, advancing cheerily into the room and setting her basket carefully down on a chair. My, but aren't you dark in here, though? Why, I can't see you a bit, she cried, unhesitatingly crossing the window and pulling up the shade. I want to see you have you fixed your hair like you did. Oh, you haven't. But never mind. I'm glad you haven't after all, because maybe you'll let me do it later. But now, I want you to see what I've brought you. The woman stirred restlessly. Just as if how it looks would make any difference in how it tastes, she scoffed, but she turned her eyes towards the basket. Well, what is it? Well, guess. What do you want? Pollyanna skipped back to the basket. Her face was alight. The second woman frowned. Why, I don't want anything as I know of, she sighed. After all, they all taste alike. Pollyanna chuckled. Well, this won't. Guess. If you did want something, what would it be? The woman hesitated. She did not realize it herself, but she had so long been accustomed to wanting what she did not have that to state offhand what she did want seemed impossible until she knew what she had. Obviously, however, she must say something. This extraordinary child was waiting. Well, of course, there's lamb's broth. I've got it, crowed Pollyanna. That's what I didn't want, sighed the sick woman, now sure now what her stomach craved. It was chicken I wanted. Oh, I've got that too, chuckled Pollyanna. The woman turned in amazement. Both of them? She demanded. Yep, and calf's foot jelly, triumphed Pollyanna. I was just bound you should have what you wanted for once, so Nancy and I fixed it. Of course, there's only a little of each, but there's some of all of them. I'm so glad you did want the chicken, she went on contentedly as she lifted the 3 little bowls from her basket. You see, I got to thinking on the way here, what if she should say tripe or onions or something like that, and I didn't have? Wouldn't that have been a shame when I tried so hard? She laughed merrily. There was no reply. The sick woman seemed to be trying mentally to find something she had lost. There, I'm to leave them all, announced Pollyanna as she arranged the 3 bowls in a row on the table. Like enough, it'll be lamb's broth you do want tomorrow. So, How do you do today? She finished in polite inquiry. Very poorly, thank you, muttered Mrs. Snow, falling back into her usual listless attitude. I lost my nap this morning. Nellie Higgins next door has begun music lessons, and her practicing drives me nearly wild. She was at it all the morning, every minute. I'm sure I don't know what I shall do. Pollyanna nodded sympathetically. I know. It is awful. Mrs. White had it once. One of my lady's aiders, you know. She had rheumatic fever, too, at the same time, so she couldn't thrash around. She said it would have been easier if she could have. Can you? Can I? What? Well, thrash round. Move, you know. So as to change your position when the music gets too hard to stand. Mrs. Snow stared a little. But, of course I can move. Anywhere. In bed. She rejoined a little irritably. Well, you can be glad of that anyhow, can't you? Nodded Pollyanna. Well, Mrs. White couldn't it? You can't thrash around when you have rheumatic fever. Though you want to something awful, Mrs. White says. She told me afterwards she reckoned she'd have gone raving crazy if she hadn't been for Mrs. White's sister's ears. Being deaf, so. Sister's ears? What do you mean? Pollyanna laughed. Well, I reckon I didn't tell it all, and I forgot you didn't know Mrs. White. You see, Miss White was deaf, awfully deaf, and she came to visit him and to help to take care of Mrs. White in the house. Well, they had such an awful time making her understand anything that after that, every time the piano commenced to play across the street, Mrs. White felt so glad she could hear it that she didn't mind so much she did hear it, because she couldn't help thinking how awful it would be if she were deaf and couldn't hear anything like her husband's sister. You see, she was playing the game, too. I told her about it. The game? Pollyanna clapped her hands. There, I almost forgot, but I thought it up, Mrs. Snow. What you can be glad about. Glad about? What do you mean? Well, I told you I would. Don't you remember? You asked me to tell you something to be glad about. Glad you know, even though you'd have to lie here in bed all day. Oh, scoffed the woman. That? Yeah, I remember that. But I didn't suppose you were in earnest any more than I was. Oh, yes, I was, nodded Pollyanna triumphantly. And I found it, too. But 'twas hard. It's all the more fun, though, always when it's hard. And I will own up, honest to true, I couldn't think of anything for a while. Then I got it. Did you? Really? Well, what was it? Snow's voice was sarcastically polite. Pollyanna drew a long breath. Well, I thought how glad you could be that other folks weren't like you, all sick in bed like this, you know? She announced impressively. Mrs. Snow stared. Her eyes were angry. Well, really, she ejaculated then, in not quite an agreeable tone of voice. Well, now I'll tell you the game, proposed Pollyanna, blithely confident. It'll be just as lovely for you to play. It'll be so hard. And there's so much more fun when it's hard. You see, it's like this. And she began to tell of the missionary barrel, the crutches, and the doll that did not come. The story was just finished when Milly appeared at the door. Your aunt is wanting you, Miss Pollyanna, she said with dreary listlessness. She telephoned down to the Harlows across the way. She says you're to hurry, that you've got some practicing to make up before dark. Pollyanna rose reluctantly. All right, she sighed. Well, I'll hurry. Suddenly she laughed. I suppose I ought to be glad I've got legs to hurry with, hadn't I, Mrs. Snow? There was no answer. Mrs. Snow's eyes were closed, but Milly, whose eyes were wide open with surprise, saw that there were tears on the wasted cheeks. Goodbye, flung Pollyanna over her shoulder as she reached the door. I'm awfully sorry about the hair. I wanted to do it, but maybe next time. One by one, the July days passed. To Pollyanna, they were happy days indeed. She often told her aunt joyously how happy they were, whereupon her aunt would usually reply wearily, Very well, Pollyanna. I am gratified, of course, that they are happy, but I trust they are profitable as well. Otherwise, I should have failed signally in my duty. Generally, Pollyanna would answer this with a hug and a kiss, a proceeding that was still always most disconcerting to Miss Polly. But one day she spoke. It was during the sewing hour. Do you mean that it wouldn't be enough then, Aunt Polly, that they should just be happy days? She asked wistfully. That is what I mean, Pollyanna. They must be profitable as well? Certainly. What is being profitable? Why, it's just being profitable. Having profit, something to show for it, Pollyanna. What an extraordinary child you are. Then just being glad isn't profitable? Questioned Pollyanna a little anxiously. Well, certainly not. Oh dear. Well, then you wouldn't like it, of course. I'm afraid now you won't ever play the game, Aunt Polly. Game? What game? Why, that father. Pollyanna clapped her hands to her lips. Nothing, she stammered. Miss Polly frowned. That will do for this morning, Pollyanna, she said tersely, and the sewing lesson was over. It was that afternoon that Pollyanna, coming down from her attic room, met her aunt on the stairway. Why, Aunt Polly, how perfectly lovely, she cried. You were coming up to see me. Come right in. I love company, she finished, scampering up the stairs and throwing her door wide open. Now, Miss Polly had not been intending to call on her niece. She had been planning to look for a certain white wool shawl in the cedar chest near the east window. But to her unbounded surprise, now she found herself not in the main attic before the cedar chest, but in Pollyanna's little room, sitting in one of the straight back chairs. So many times since Pollyanna came, Miss Polly had found herself like this, doing some utterly unexpected, surprising thing, quite unlike the thing she had set out to do. I love company, said Pollyanna again, flitting about as if she were dispensing the hospitality of a palace. Especially since I've had this room. All mine, you know. Of course, I had a room always, but it was a hired room, and hired rooms aren't half as nice as own ones, are they? And of course, I do own this one, don't I? But yes, Pollyanna, murmured Miss Polly, vaguely wondering why she did not get up at once and go look for that shawl. Well, and of course, now I just love this room. Even it hasn't got the carpets and curtains and pictures that I've been wanting. With a painful blush, Pollyanna stopped short. She was plunging into an entirely different sentence, but her aunt interrupted her sharply. What's that, Pollyanna? Well, nothing, Aunt Polly, truly. I didn't mean to say it. Probably not, returned Miss Polly coldly, but you did say it. So suppose we have the rest of it. But it wasn't anything, only I'd been kind of planning on pretty carpets and lace curtains and things, you know, but of course, planning on them, interrupted Miss Polly sharply. Pollyanna blushed still more painfully. Well, I ought not to have, of course, Aunt Polly, she apologized. It was only 'cause I always wanted them and hadn't had them, I suppose. Oh, we'd had 2 rugs in the barrels, but they were little, you know, and one had ink spots in the other holes, and there never were only those 2 pictures. The good one we sold and the bad one that I broke. Of course, if it hadn't been for all that, I shouldn't have wanted them. So pretty things. I shouldn't have got to planning all through the hall that first day how pretty mine would be here. But truly, Aunt Polly, it wasn't but just a minute. I mean, a few minutes before I was being glad that the bureau didn't have a looking glass because it didn't show my freckles, and there couldn't be a nicer picture than the one at my window there. And he'd been so good to me that Miss Polly rose suddenly to her feet. Her face was very red. That will do, Pollyanna, she said stiffly. You have said quite enough, I'm sure. The next minute she had swept down the stairs, and not until she reached the first floor did it suddenly occur to her that she had gone up to the attic to find a white wool shawl in the cedar chest near the east window. Less than 24 hours later, Miss Polly said to Nancy crisply, Nancy, you may move Miss Pollyanna's things downstairs this morning to the room directly beneath. I've decided to have my niece sleep there for the present. Yes, ma'am, said Nancy aloud. Oh, glory, said Nancy to herself. To Pollyanna, a minute later, she cried joyously, And won't you just be listening to this, Miss Pollyanna? You're to sleep downstairs in a room straight under this. You are, you are. Pollyanna actually grew white. You mean, what, Nancy? Well, not really. Really and truly? I guess you think it's really and truly. I guess you'd think it's really and truly, prophesied Nancy exultingly, nodding her head to Pollyanna over the armful of dresses she had taken down from the closet. I'm told to take down your things, and I'm going to take them too, before she gets a chance to change her mind. Pollyanna did not stop to hear the end of the sentence. At the imminent risk of being dashed headlong, she went flying downstairs 2 steps at a time. Bang went 2 doors and a chair before Pollyanna at last reached her goal. Aunt Polly. Oh, Aunt Polly, did you mean it, really? Why, that room's got everything. The carpet, the curtain, 3 pictures besides one's outdoors, too, because the windows look the same way. Oh, Aunt Polly. Very well, Pollyanna. I am gratified that you like the change, of course. But if you think so much of all these things, I trust you will take proper care of them. That's all. Pollyanna, please pick up that chair, and you have banged 2 doors in the last half-minute. Miss Polly spoke sternly, all the more sternly because for some inexplicable reason she felt inclined to cry. And Miss Polly was not used to feeling inclined to cry. Pollyanna picked up the chairs. Yes, well, I know I banged on those doors, she admitted cheerfully. You see, I just found about the room, and I reckon you'd have banged doors too if... Pollyanna stopped short and eyed her aunt with new interest. Aunt Polly, did you ever bang doors? Why, hope not, Pollyanna. Miss Polly's voice was properly shocked. What, Aunt Polly? What a shame. Pollyanna's face expressed only concerned sympathy. The shame, repeated Aunt Polly, too dazed to say more. Well, yes. You see, if you'd felt like banging doors, you'd have banged them, of course. And if you didn't, that must have meant you were never glad over anything. Or you'd have banged them. You couldn't have helped it. And I'm so sorry you were never glad over anything. Pollyanna, gasped the lady. But Pollyanna was gone, and only the distant bang of the attic stairway door answered for her. Pollyanna had gone to help Nancy bring down her things. Miss Polly, in the sitting room, feeling vaguely disturbed. But then, of course, she had been glad over some things. Chapter 11. Introducing Jimmy. August came. August brought several surprises and some changes, none of which, however, were really a surprise to Nancy. Nancy, since Pollyanna's arrival, had come to look for surprises and changes. First, there was the kitten. Pollyanna found the kitten mewing pitifully some distance down the road. When systematic questioning of the neighbors failed to find anyone who claimed it, Pollyanna brought it home at once, as a matter of course. And I was glad I didn't find anyone who owned it too, she told her aunt in happy confidence. 'Cause I wanted to bring it home all the time. I love kitties. I knew you'd be glad to let it live here. Miss Polly looked at the forlorn little gray bunch of neglected misery in Pollyanna's arms and shivered. Miss Polly did not care for cats, not even pretty, healthy, clean ones. Pollyanna, what a dirty little beast. And it's sick, I'm sure, and all mangy and fleagy. I know, a poor little thing, crowed Pollyanna tenderly, looking into the little creature's frightened eyes. And it's all trembly, too. It's so scared. You see, it doesn't know yet that we're going to keep it, of course. No, nor anyone else, retorted Miss Polly with meaning emphasis. Oh, yes, they do, nodded Pollyanna, entirely misunderstanding her aunt's words. Why, I told everybody we should keep it if I didn't find where it belonged. I knew you'd be glad to have it, poor little lonesome thing. Miss Polly opened her lips and tried to speak, but in vain. The curious, helpless feeling that had been hers so often since Pollyanna's arrival had her now fast in its grip. Well, of course I knew, hurried on Pollyanna gratefully, that you wouldn't let a dear little lonesome kitty go hunting for a home when you'd just taken me in, and I said so to Mrs. Ford when she asked if you'd let me keep it. Why, I had the ladies' aid, and this kitty didn't have anybody. I knew you'd feel that way. She nodded happily as she ran from the room. But, Pollyanna, remonstrated Miss Polly. I don't. But Pollyanna was already halfway to the kitchen, calling, Nancy, just see this dear little kitty Aunt Polly's going to bring up along with me. And Aunt Polly, in the sitting room, who abhorred cats, fell back in her chair with a gasp of dismay, powerless to remonstrate. The next day, it was a dog, even dirtier and more forlorn, perhaps, than was the kitten. And again, Miss Polly, to her dumbfounded amazement, found herself figuring as a kind protector and an angel of mercy, a role that Pollyanna so unhesitatingly thrust upon her as a matter of course. That the woman, who abhorred dogs even more than she did cats, if possible, found herself, as before, powerless to remonstrate. When, in less than a week, however, Pollyanna brought home a small ragged boy and confidently claimed the same protection for him, Miss Polly did have something to say. It happened after this wise. On a pleasant Thursday morning, Pollyanna had been taking calf's foot jelly again to Mrs. Snow. Mrs. Snow and Pollyanna were the best of friends now. Their friendship had started from the third visit Pollyanna had made, the one after she had told Mrs. Snow of the game. Mrs. Snow herself was playing the game now with Pollyanna. To be sure, she was not playing it very well. She had been sorry for everything for so long that it was not easy to be glad for anything now. But under Pollyanna's cheery instructions and merry laughter at her mistakes, she was learning fast. Today, even to Pollyanna's huge delight, she had said that she was glad Pollyanna brought calf's-foot jelly, because that was just what she had been wanting. She did not know that Milly, at the front door, had told Pollyanna that the minister's wife had already that day sent over a great bowl full of the same kind of jelly. Pollyanna was thinking of this now, when suddenly she saw the boy. The boy was sitting in a disconsolate little heap by the roadside, whittling half-heartedly at a small stick. "Hello," smiled Pollyanna engagingly. The boy glanced up, but he looked away again at once. "Hello yourself," he mumbled. Pollyanna laughed. "Now you don't look as if you'd be glad even for calf's-foot jelly," she chuckled, stopping before him. The boy stirred restlessly, gave her a surprised look, and began to whittle again at a stick with a dull, broken-bladed knife in his hand. Pollyanna hesitated, then dropped herself comfortably down on the grass near him. In spite of Pollyanna's brave assertion that she was used to ladies' aiders and didn't mind, she sighed at times for some companion of her own age. Hence her determination to make the most of this one. "My name's Pollyanna Whittier," she began pleasantly. "What's yours?" Again the boy stirred restlessly. He even almost got to his feet, but he settled back. "Jimmy Bean," he grunted with ungracious indifference. "Good. Now we're introduced. Well, I'm glad you did your part. I'm glad you did your part. Some folks don't, you know. I live at Miss Polly Harrington's house. Where do you live?" "Nowhere." "Nowhere? Well, you can't do that. Everybody lives somewhere," asserted Pollyanna. "Well, I don't. Just now,